Hey there, my friends. NorEasterNick here. Guess what? We are so pumped up and excited. It's that time of the year again. The annual winter forecast is about to be published. We're going to talk about everything, including how often you're going to have to use this guy. The leaves and the trees have changed. They're basically falling now, and they're on the ground. You can almost smell winter in the air if it wasn't like 70 degrees outside. Now, who's ready to go into the studio and check out that annual forecast? I know I am. See you guys. Right out of the gate, I want to start with dispelling some common misconceptions that just aren't true. Myth number one, you don't need sunscreen. That's demonstrably false. You do in fact need sunscreen during the winter months. Snow can actually cause more damage because it's bright, white, and reflective. Myth number two, you lose 90% of your heat through your head. This is also false. While you should wear a hat because it's stylish and it will give you some warmth, your head only accounts for about 7% of your body's surface temperature. How about myth number three? I like this one. You shouldn't exercise in the cold weather. Well, this is false. I do it all the time. Running times are actually quicker in the winter. When you go outside, your endorphin levels increase, giving you more energy. Myth number four tells us that frostbite is hard to get. Well, this is false. Frostbite is actually quite common. Wet or cold skin numbs, and then blisters in as little as 30 minutes can appear, even in temperatures just above freezing. Nerve damage from blisters can turn your skin black, and you may lose fingers or toes, so always make sure that your lower extremities are covered up and are warm. Finally, myth number five. Lots of acorns means a harsh winter. Nope, there's no correlation whatsoever to what will happen the next season. It's actually based on the past weather, not the future. Putting the winter forecast together is quite literally my favorite thing to do all year long, not because we know exactly what's going to happen. Actually, it's quite the opposite. Truthfully, sometimes we have no idea what's going to happen. A quick pattern change, a storm popping up out of nowhere. There are all kinds of complexities that get thrown into the mix, and that's what makes it most exciting. Now, before we dive into all the details, I know you probably have a lot of questions, and of course you're anticipating that moment that I show you what I'm expecting in your backyard in terms of snowfall, right? We got to understand that globally, nationally, locally, we are warming. Regardless of what your opinion is on climate change, we are warming. That's an undeniable fact. You go back to 1970 and we're about 4.3 degrees warmer on average. Okay, now why is this significant? Looking at that, you're like, well, that's good for our electric bills, right? Well, yes, but also for every 1 degree that we warm, the atmosphere is holding 4% more moisture. So on average, over the past 50 years, we are holding about 16% more water vapor in the air, which in the summer season, that leads to deluges and flooding and all that kind of stuff. Not so good situations. In the winter, it can actually be beneficial if you are a snow lover. So the warm water offshore combined with a vast temperature difference between the land and the sea and all that moisture in the air, that can create some pretty big precipitation shields. And we already saw that twice last year with two big back-to-back snowstorms. So if that continues, that could definitely be something that we see this year. What you're looking at here is called the sea surface temperature anomaly. And essentially what it is, it's showing you where there are areas that are much warmer than average and cooler than average. And there are some areas, very few and far between, but are white. That shows you basically no change, kind of like where they should be for this time of the year. This is just blaring you in the face, right? The middle of your screen, this is where along the equatorial Pacific, we have cooler than normal weather or cooler than normal sea surface temperatures. That's a La Niña. And this is a triple dip La Niña year. We had La Niña last year. We had it the year before. Last year we had a very good amount of snow. The year before, not so much. So not every La Niña is created equal. What's also interesting here is a triple dip La Niña is very rare. They've only happened a handful of times over the past 100 years, and this is only the second time since 2000. So it's been 20 years since we got in on a triple dip La Niña. The El Nino Southern Oscillation, ENSO, that cycle is not the only thing that we look at. We look at the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, Up here, we look at the North Atlantic Oscillation, the Pacific North America pattern. All these terms you're going to hear me talk about throughout the course of the winter, and they're just different patterns that can have an upper hand at times. One thing we also have to take into consideration is how warm the water is off the East Coast. Now, people usually think, oh, warm water, that's bad for snow. Not at all. I like to see warm water offshore because you get that big temperature gradient, and that's how you can create those robust storms to produce more snow. Now, a downfall of that is the stronger a storm is, obviously, the more likely we are to have significant flooding, especially if the moon cycle lines up the right way. What does that cooler water in the Pacific do? Well, it impacts our overall upper air pattern over the continental United States, over North America, where most of the cold air is bottled up over Canada, and the worst of the winter weather is usually in northwest Canada, and sometimes it seeps down into the northern plain states of the United States. Every now and then, the polar jet is going to be coming down into our neck of the woods, bringing us cold shots, but it's rare that we see these prolonged periods of cold weather, for an entire month or so. Usually they're very brief, but as those patterns change up, that's typically our best opportunity to get in on some stormy weather. The Pacific jet brings a lot of precipitation, rain, and snow to the Pacific Northwest, and the southern states are usually warmer and drier, with us kind of like on the edge all the time. So that means that we are most likely to see the colder than normal weather across the northern plains. So through Minnesota, through North Dakota, South Dakota, creeping down into Nebraska, I truly think it's going to be an above normal winter for us with the temperatures. I'm going anywhere between 1 and 3 degrees. I think 2 or 3 is pushing it, but definitely averaging over a degree above normal. We are kind of like right on the edge in that department, with the average weather just out to our west. That also correlates to near average snowfall for our backyard. Now, all it takes is one big nor'easter, 15 to 20 inch event to kind of bury that theory. But looking at the trends, looking at the analogs, we look at years where things were similar, this is what makes most sense to me. With most of the snow over the Great Lakes, over the northern plains, and then dipping down into the Ohio Valley with maybe 25% above normal. For us, I think it's very close to normal. But before I show you what those totals are, we got to talk about how we get snow. There are 3 distinct storm tracks that we see each and every year. Number 1 is the most common. This is a clipper system. Area low pressure originates over Alberta, Canada, dips down through the plain states, through the Ohio Valley, and emerges off the East Coast. That brings us a quick moving storm, light events, generally 1 to 4 inch storms. We call them nuisance type storms, right? No major issues. Now, track number 2 is quite literally the bane of my existence, and they can start out as clippers, coming down from Canada, tracking across the Ohio Valley, but then they transfer their energy to a coastal low. And these are slower moving storms. They can bring big snow, they can bring big flooding, but they're very complicated. If you remember back in, I think it was 2015, blizzard warnings up and down the East Coast. We're expecting 30 inches of snow. And if we got 30 centimeters in some locations, that was a lot. It materialized, but much too late to be any impact to New Jersey. It was more of a New England thing. So those are really difficult to nail down. Last year, we were very lucky. We had your more traditional nor'easter. Area low pressure originates down in the Gulf of Mexico, climbs up the coast. Now, these vary in speed. Sometimes you can get a quick hitter, 12 to 18 hours, but sometimes they're drawn out over 2 or 3 days. These can bring a lot of snow, but also a lot of coastal flooding depending on the phase of the moon. And again, we call these your classic nor'easter. We haven't had one in many years, but then we had 2 back-to-back last year in a La Niña pattern. So can we do that again this year? Well, I think it's going to be more of a traditional winter where the shore gets the least. I'm going 8 to 12 inches down through Atlantic City and Cape May County, Ventnor, Margate, Longport, Upper Township, maybe the southeast portion of Cumberland County. You get into Millville, you get into Winslow, Stafford Township, Toms River. I'm going 14 to 18. Now, as a point of reference, the average right here is about 16 inches. So I'm going either side of that. Farther north and west towards Salem, Gloucester, Camden, Burlington County, 16 to 20, usually average about 22 in that area. North and west of Philadelphia, 20 to 24, and the Pocono Mountains, about 2 feet of snow. So I looked at all the averages, I looked at the La Nina years, and then I subtracted a little bit. I'm erring on the side of caution, okay? I do believe that 1 or 2 good storms is possible and can easily get us to these numbers. Last year we had more of like a pineapple upside down cake kind of winter where the shore got the most. I'm not expecting that to be the case this year. The I-95 corridor points north and west. That is where we are most likely to get in on the worst of the winter weather. So I think it's going to be more of a front-loaded season. We are definitely going to see warm weather through November, but maybe by Thanksgiving or early December, we'll start to see things flip around a little bit. I believe that we should start to see our snow by early to mid-December. I think our first snowstorm is probably by mid-December, maybe our first nor'easter. Then what's interesting is there are hints that the La Nina pattern could start to weaken a little bit, and that could jolt everything in a completely different direction by the end of the winter. But I think the January thaw is probably a thing by mid-month. 2 to 3 nor'easters are likely, but what they amount to, well, that's open for debate. We can't tell you until it's actually happening. So what could go wrong? If you ever hear me talk about the dreaded Southeast Ridge, you know it's my least favorite thing in the winter season. So that pushes the jet stream to the north, and it really overwhelms the mid-Atlantic, especially with mild air. You end up with sloppy mix events and rain and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to hope that the Southeast Ridge isn't a big deal this year, but most years it usually peeks its little ugly head out. So in short, I'm not going with this extreme idea of winter. We're probably above normal in our temperature department and slightly below average with the snowfall. No matter what happens, I will be here to walk you through it every step of the way. Feel free to follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at NorEasterNick, and I look forward to having a very, hopefully, fun winter together.